it's time for another build video, and this time I'm going to be talking about my Stasis build, because I've pretty much done every single class at this point apart from Stasis, and whilst I am still working on my Strand build, I think I just might as well showcase this while I can. And yes, don't judge the transmog too harshly, there's not a great deal I can do with this mask at the minute, unless you obviously have seen my drip video, which is linked up above, because that's the intention I want to go for the Stasis build when it comes to its drip. But anyway, not the point. The build itself might be a bit different when you compare it to other Hunter Stasis builds, because this one doesn't actually use Shatter Dive, and I'm going to be honest, the reason for that is that this build doesn't really make the stasis crystals that much. It just mostly focuses on dust grenade and a few other things as well. Which brings me very nicely to the dust field grenade, which is what I use for this build. But then again, you can swap to the cold snap grenade if you want something that's a bit more precise. But generally, for PvE, dust field grenade is quite good. For the aspects, I'm using Touch of Winter because when it comes to using the grenades, they get a little bit of bonus functionality, which is always nice to have. But it also gives me 2 fragment slots. For the other aspect, I'm using Grim Harvest because this gives you 3 fragment slots, which is still surprising to me. But I am mostly getting this for the Stasis shards. And Stasis shards are basically spawned when you kill an enemy that is slowed or frozen, but because we're using Dust Field Grenade, they are going to most likely be slowed. And when you collect these Stasis shards, you get back a fair amount of melee energy, but also there is another bonus that comes along with this, but I'll talk about that in a second. For Fragments, I'm going to start with Whisper of Refraction, because this gives me a class ability energy anytime I defeat a slow or frozen target, but in this case, they'll mostly be slowed. Whisper of Conduction, because this allows Stasis shards to track to my position, as well as gives me a nice little boost for both resilience and intellect. Whisper of Hunger does give me even more melee energy from the Stasis shards I pick up, but there is a downside of mobility and recovery. Whisper of Torment is that I gain grenade energy every time I take damage from targets, which is a good thing because the grenade regen is quite poor on this class. And finally, Whisper of Rhyme, so whenever I pick up a Stasis shard, I get a small amount of overshield. So in a nutshell, the way this subclass works is that you use the Dust Field Grenade to slow enemies down, kill them using that or using shurikens. That will then spawn a Stasis shard, which will then come towards you because you've got tracking, and that will grant you a small amount of overshield. Not to mention a fair amount of melee energy as well, so you can throw even more shurikens out. And then that becomes a constant cycle of you throwing shurikens and spawning stasis shards and just going from there. But now let's talk about the weapons before I go into the armor pieces, because I actually have the Ray Shotgun, which is a conditional finality. I will just say right now, you don't need to be using this. I'm only using it because it's a strong close range weapon. Feel free to use whatever other weapon that you want for this slot. For my energy slot, I'm using an Iclos SMG because I'm going to be mostly in close range, and SMGs are just absolutely amazing at the minute. Of course, you can pick whatever you want to use, but I would personally recommend that you pick something that is arc. And then finally, I've got the Reed Forget Linear Fusion Rifle, and I'm going to be honest, I literally only use this because it's a Stasis Linear Fusion, and it does a lot of damage. You can, again, pretty much use any other weapon in the slot. Brownie points, you could actually use Thunderlord, because Thunderlord is an arc-heavy machine gun, and you might like it with what I'm about to say. Because the exotic I use for this build is Mask of Bakris, and this is quite a nice exotic for when you're using Stasis. Because not only does it replace your dodge with more of a blink-like ability, when you've actually done your dodge, your arc weapons become even stronger, and not only that, you deal even more damage to all slowed or frozen combatants. And considering this build is specializing in slowing and freezing combatants, and actually getting Stasis shards from it, if you pair this with a Thunderlord perhaps, you could do some nasty damage to a lot of ads very quickly. As for mods on the Helm of Bakris, I'm using Arc Siphon because I'm going to be using arc weapons. It makes sense that I can use them to spawn orbs of power. Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout, because if I'm running with a fire team, this allows me to make heavy ammo bricks a lot more regular, and also a chance for them to drop to my allies. Of course, if you're running solo, this doesn't really matter. Feel free to fill it in with whatever you want. On my arms, I'm using Arc Loader because increasing the reload speed of SMGs is just amazing. I'm also using Heavy Handed, which allows me to create orbs of power with melee final blows, so every time I throw a shuriken and kill a combatant with it, it will spawn an orb of power as well. And then I've got Focus and Strike, which gives me class ability whenever I cause damage with a melee attack. And like I said earlier, because I'm going to be throwing a lot of shurikens because of all the melee energy I'm getting back, this is going to be really nice. Chest piece, pretty standard across the season now. I've just literally have one of each. I don't really use any other mods, if I'm going to be honest. But feel free to replace them with whatever you're comfortable with using. They aren't exactly essential. For my leg armor, much like with every other build that I have recuperation because this gives me health every time I pick up an orb of power. But I also have 2 weapon surges. I have the Stasis weapon surge and the arc weapon surge, because every time I pick up an orb of power, I get a temporary armor charge which will increase the damage of those weapons. And as you saw earlier, I've got 2 Stasis weapons and an arc weapon, so this benefits me massively. And finally for the cloak, I have Outreach, which basically reduces melee cooldown when I use my class ability, so every time I blink, then if my shurikens are on cooldown, they come back faster. I also have Proximity Ward, because if I'm doing a finisher, I want an overshield, just pretty much simple as that. And then the final mod is Time Dilation, because I want my armor charges to stay around for quite a while. I've left out all the stat mods because honestly, when you come to building this, you can use whatever stats you want. I'd say as a preference, you want to lean more towards strength and resilience, if anything. But also having a spread like this isn't exactly bad either, because if you have 100 resilience and you get an overshield as well, you're pretty much solving your health issue. Not to mention with recuperation, you can get your health back quickly, so recovery shouldn't really become a factor unless you're doing PvP. With strength, tier 5 is fine because you'll be getting enough regen back from collecting orbs of power and also all the extras on the mods anyway. That's for me having 100 intellect. I literally just want my super back quicker if I'm going to be honest. And that is the Stasis Hunter build. So let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you use it, also let me know because I'm kind of keen to see who would use it. But also leave a like whilst you're down there, and I shall see you all in the next video.